Looking back on my childhood from where I stand today, a 35-year-old woman with my own family and a life rebuilt from the ashes, I can finally see the patterns that once seemed normal to me. The memories still come in waves, sometimes crashing over me when I least expect them, other times receding gently as I've learned to process them through years of therapy. But I'm not that frightened girl anymore. I've found my voice. This is my story. I was 11 when everything changed. Just a child really, still collecting stuffed animals and watching cartoons on Saturday mornings. My single mother had struggled to keep us afloat for years, working multiple jobs, the lines of exhaustion etched deeper on her face with each passing month. When she met Richard at a friend's barbecue, something in her changed. I saw hope in her eyes again, something I hadn't realized had been missing. Their courtship was a whirlwind. Within 6 months, Richard had moved into our small apartment, bringing with him promises of stability and a better life. I was thrilled to have a father figure after years without one. Richard was charming, bringing me little gifts and taking an interest in my hobbies. He'd ask about my day at school and help with homework when Mom was working late. I remember thinking how lucky we were that he had chosen us. The wedding was small, just a courthouse ceremony followed by dinner at our favorite restaurant. Mom wore a simple white dress, and I was given a silver bracelet with a heart charm that matched hers. "We're family now," Richard said, giving me a hug that lasted just a moment too long. That night, as I traced the outline of the heart charm with my fingertip, I couldn't have known that the memento would later become a symbol of everything that went wrong. The changes were subtle at first, nearly imperceptible. Richard insisted on driving me to school instead of letting me take the bus with my friends. "It's safer this way," he told Mom, who smiled gratefully at his protectiveness. He began commenting on my clothes. Certain items were suddenly too mature or inappropriate, though Mom had bought them herself just months before. I remember the first night I felt truly uneasy. Mom was working a late shift at the hospital, and Richard had made dinner for just the two of us. He'd poured himself several glasses of wine, something I hadn't seen him do before. "You know, you're becoming quite the young lady," he said, his eyes lingering on me in a way that made my stomach tighten. "Pretty soon the boys will be coming around." "I guess," I mumbled, pushing food around my plate. "Your mom was beautiful at your age too," he continued. "But you're going to be even prettier, I can tell." That night, I locked my bedroom door for the first time. I told myself I was being silly, that he was just trying to be nice. Now, looking back as an adult who works with children professionally, I recognize this moment for what it was, the beginning of grooming, the careful testing of boundaries. Within weeks, Richard's comments had evolved into accidental touches, a hand on my shoulder that would slide down my back, helping me with homework while sitting unnecessarily close. Each incident was plausibly deniable, carefully calculated to make me doubt my own discomfort. At 35, I understand the insidious nature of how predators operate. They don't immediately reveal themselves. They condition their victims gradually, normalizing inappropriate behavior step by step until the unthinkable becomes routine. It was a Tuesday evening in April when the line was finally crossed. My mother had taken on extra shifts to save for a family vacation that summer. Richard had been drinking again, and I was doing dishes after dinner when he came up behind me. "Let me show you how to do that properly," he said, pressing against me, his hands covering mine in the soapy water. I tried to move away, but he held me in place. "Just relax," he whispered, his breath hot against my ear. "I'm just trying to help you." That night marked the end of my childhood. The fear, confusion, and shame that followed are feelings I wouldn't wish on anyone. I've spent years in therapy unpacking the complex emotions of that moment and the countless others that followed. In the aftermath, I became a different person. The bubbly, confident 11-year-old disappeared, replaced by a withdrawn, anxious child who jumped at sudden noises and avoided eye contact. My grades plummeted. I stopped participating in after-school activities. I began wearing oversized clothes regardless of the weather, as if fabric could somehow shield me from what was happening. My mother noticed the changes but attributed them to typical adolescent behavior. "She's just becoming a teenager," Richard assured her when she expressed concern. "All kids go through this phase." And so the abuse continued, a terrible secret locked inside our home for the next 6 years. At 17, my youth group planned a summer retreat, a week-long camping trip 3 states away. Richard initially objected, but my mother, concerned about my increasing isolation, insisted I should go. She needs to spend time with kids her own age, she argued. It was the first time I'd seen her stand up to him, and to my surprise, he relented. Those 7 days away from home were transformative. Surrounded by peers and supportive adults, I felt the weight on my shoulders lighten for the first time in years. I laughed again. I slept through the night without waking in terror. Most importantly, I began to understand that what was happening to me wasn't normal. One of the youth counselors, a college student named Emma, noticed how I flinched when people came too close. During a hike, she fell back from the group to walk beside me. "You know you can talk to me if something's wrong," she said quietly. "About anything." Perhaps it was the distance from home, or the realization that I couldn't endure another day under that roof, but something in me broke open. That evening, I wrote everything down in a letter and gave it to Emma with shaking hands. The next few hours were a blur of phone calls, concerned adults, and police officers taking statements. I felt simultaneously terrified and relieved, like someone who's been drowning and finally breaks the surface to gasp for air. But my relief was short-lived. When I returned home, I faced the full force of Richard's manipulation. He had convinced my mother, her family, and most of our small community that I was lying for attention. "Why would you make up something so horrible?" my mother sobbed. "After everything he's done for us." The police investigation stalled without physical evidence or witnesses. Faced with disbelief from every direction and Richard's increasingly menacing presence, I did what many frightened teenagers do. I recanted my statement. "I made it all up," I told the detective, my voice hollow. "I just wanted some attention." The case was closed. Richard returned home triumphant, and the abuse not only continued but intensified, now coupled with threats to ensure my silence. The years that followed were the darkest of my life. Having tried and failed to escape, I lost hope. I became a ghost in my own home, moving silently through rooms, trying to be invisible. At night, I would wedge my desk chair under my doorknob, even knowing it wouldn't keep him out if he was determined. By 20, I was barely functioning. I had graduated high school with mediocre grades, too afraid to pursue college and leave my younger half-sister alone with Richard. I found a job at a local convenience store working nights, sleeping during the day when the house was empty. My life had become a series of calculated moves designed solely to minimize the time spent at home. During this period, I developed destructive coping mechanisms, drinking heavily on my nights off, engaging in self-harm just to feel something I could control. I look back at this young woman now with such compassion, understanding that she was doing everything she could to survive an impossible situation. The turning point came unexpectedly. One night at work, a customer forgot her credit card. When she returned to claim it, she noticed the scars on my wrists that my uniform failed to hide. "I used to have those too," she said simply, meeting my eyes without judgment. Her name was Diane, and she was a social worker who had survived her own abusive childhood. Something about her calm, matter-of-fact acknowledgement broke through my carefully constructed walls. Over the next few weeks, she would stop by during my shifts, sometimes just for coffee, sometimes to talk. "When you're ready," she told me one night, "there are people who will believe you." 3 months after meeting Diane, I made the decision that would ultimately save my life. I had just turned 21, and Richard had begun making comments about my half-sister, who had recently turned 12. History was preparing to repeat itself, and I couldn't let that happen. On a Tuesday morning after my mother and Richard had left for work, I packed a small bag with essentials, withdrew the meager savings from my account, and left a note for my sister with Diane's number and the words, "If you ever need help, call this number. I love you." Then I walked out of that house and didn't look back. The first few months were chaotic. I slept on Diane's couch until I found a roommate situation I could afford. I cut contact with my family, changed my phone number, and lived in constant fear that Richard would find me. But gradually, with distance from the abuse, I began to see my situation more clearly. Diane connected me with a support group for survivors, where for the first time, I met people who understood without explanation. She also helped me find a therapist who specialized in trauma, though it would take years before I could fully engage with therapy without dissociating. Despite these supports, I struggled. Nightmares kept me from sleeping. Flashbacks would hit without warning, leaving me paralyzed in terror in the middle of ordinary activities. I self-medicated with alcohol, unable to face the full weight of my experiences without numbing myself. This period of my life wasn't a straight line to recovery. It was messy, painful, and filled with setbacks. There were nights I considered ending everything, convinced the damage done to me was irreparable. The path back to myself was neither quick nor easy. It came in small moments. The first night I slept without nightmares, the first time I trusted a friend enough to share parts of my story, the day I realized I'd gone 24 hours without thinking about Richard. At 25, I met David at a community college where I'd finally enrolled in classes. Our relationship developed slowly, built on mutual respect and clear boundaries. When I eventually told him about my past, his response was simply to hold my hand and say, "Thank you for trusting me with that." No pity, no horror, just acceptance. With David's encouragement, I finally reported Richard again. This time, I was an adult with support systems in place. This time, I was believed. The investigation was lengthy and difficult. I learned that Richard had other victims. My sister, thankfully, had not been one of them thanks to my warning, but there had been others before me. 2 came forward after hearing about my case. Testifying in court was both the hardest and most empowering experience of my life. I looked Richard in the eyes as I detailed the years of abuse, no longer the frightened child he had controlled. The jury found him guilty on multiple counts, and he was sentenced to 15 years. The day of sentencing, I stood outside the courthouse feeling the weight of a decade-long nightmare finally lifting. I wasn't naive enough to believe that the trauma would disappear with his imprisonment, but for the first time, I felt a profound sense of justice. Today, at 35, I am more than what happened to me. I am a counselor working with at-risk youth, using my experience to identify the signs I wish someone had seen in me. I am a mother to a 9-year-old daughter whom I am raising to know her boundaries matter. I am a wife in a partnership built on mutual respect. I still have difficult days. Certain triggers can still transport me back to that house, that time. But I've developed healthy coping mechanisms and a supportive community that helps me navigate these moments. My relationship with my mother is complicated. After Richard's conviction, she reached out, devastated by what she had failed to see. We're slowly rebuilding trust through family therapy, though some wounds may never fully heal. My sister and I have become close, united by our shared resolve to break the cycle. The silver bracelet Richard gave me on my mother's wedding day sits in a box in my closet. I keep it not as a memento but as a reminder of how far I've come. Sometimes, healing means carrying your scars with you, understanding they're proof of your survival, not evidence of your brokenness. If you're reading this and recognizing your own experience in my words, I want you to know something I didn't know at 11, or 17, or even 21. You are not alone, and what happened to you is not your fault. The path to healing isn't linear. There will be days when it feels impossible, when the weight of the past threatens to pull you under. But there are also moments of unexpected joy, of connection, of realizing you are more resilient than you ever thought possible. For those who suspect a child in their life is being abused, please listen to your instincts. Look for the changes in behavior that adults around me dismissed: withdrawal, sudden academic problems, inappropriate knowledge of sexual matters, fear of certain people or places. Your willingness to see what others ignore could save a life. And for those who, like my younger self, have tried to speak up only to be silenced or disbelieved, please don't give up. There are people who will listen. There are resources available, even when it seems like there aren't. Your voice matters. I share my story not because it's unique, tragically, it's far too common, but because silence protects abusers, not their victims. By speaking our truth, we reclaim our narratives and potentially help others find their way out of the darkness. The shadows of yesterday will always be part of my story, but they no longer define my tomorrow. And that, perhaps, is the greatest victory of all.